So the topic I chose was Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act by Brittany N. Peoples from Graham State University. The reason why I chose the Child Abuse and Prevention Treatment Act is that I work for DCFS under the Child Welfare Services, and this is what our workload is about: child abuse and prevention. So I'd like to start off with some little did you know facts that a lot of people think that child abuse is just physical abuse, but in fact, it can be physical, sexual exploitation, and emotional abuse. And dealing with the agency, sometimes it's a little harder to prove emotional abuse. This is a little fact that I found that basically says that over 900,000 cases of child abuse and neglect are received in the United States, and most of them are toddlers and infants. And another one is African Americans, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and children of multiple races and ethnic groups actually experience the more higher rate of abuse or neglect. And I thought that was pretty alarming. The description of the problem that we have is that child abuse and neglect is a critical problem that impacts families and children all around. Children actually make up 13% of the United States, and most will fall victim in some kind of way of abuse or neglect before the age of 18. So the point of the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act policy was to provide funds to each state to complete prevention, assessment of services, investigations, protection, and treatment activities in which grants would be provided to public agencies and nonprofits in order to address the child abuse and prevention of abuse that was occurring. So this next slide that I'm going to show is just a little short snippet of a man kind of explaining how the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act came about.
Child abuse and neglect is a serious issue that affects thousands of Americans annually. While the duty to protect children usually rests with parents and the state, many state programs must abide by federal law in order to receive federal funding. A major source of legislation that supports child welfare was passed in 1974 under the name Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, or CAPTA. According to the Child Information Gateway, CAPTA provides federal funding to states in support of prevention, assessment, investigation, prosecution, and treatment activities, and also provides grants to public agencies and nonprofit organizations for demonstration programs and projects. CAPTA also helped establish the Office on Child Abuse and Neglect and set forth a minimum definition of child abuse and neglect. CAPTA has been modified and amended several times over the years, but this hallmark legislation paved the way for many modern child abuse laws. If you suspect a child is being abused, you should notify your proper state authorities immediately. If you've been accused of child abuse or neglect, it's important you speak with an attorney in your area.
Okay, so the description of the policy, as the video stated, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act was originally enacted in 1974. The purpose of the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act was to provide state funding to each state to, create a description of policy, which created funds for each state to be able to assess, investigate, prosecute, and as well as provide other services to prevent child abuse. And this kind of started back off in about 1874 with a little girl by the name of Little Mary Elaine. Apparently there was some suspected abuse or neglect, and the people that suspected it went to the authorities, and there was no laws that actually protected children that were abused or neglected. So with her particular case led to some type of legislation back then to kind of look at, say, hey, this is a problem for child abuse and neglect. So to make a long story short, little Mary was actually removed from the caretaker's home, and she was placed with the people that actually discovered that she was abused, and she ended up being able to live on and have her own family and stuff. But that's kind of how child abuse and neglect kind of got a roll into the United States. Let's see. And the goal and objective of the policy is to integrate the field of social work, legal, mental health services, substance abuse, and other community-based organizations, as well as the coordination of the government and private sectors, while emphasizing the need for abuse or neglect treatment prevention, as well as providing properly training to staff like child welfare and other nonprofit services. And these just kind of mention the programs and services. Of course, it's by the state and the state grants. The benefits includes as far as in the intake and the screening, investigations, risk and safety assessments. This also includes more of the legal terms of people being prosecuted, and the community-based child abuse prevention services is more of in-home services, child care, adoption, referral to other services that the families may need, as well as domestic violence will fall under this particular program. And the services and delivery, this is kind of like what the Child Abuse Prevention Act kind of falls under, as well. Like hospitals, we already know that they're of course mandated reporters, so they'll make reports if they feel like someone's being abused or neglected. As far as DCFS, we get a lot of reports from school systems, from officials that fear that kids are being abused or neglected. Of course, child welfare services, child protective services, FINS, family in need of services, and other government systems. We also have nonprofit agencies that play like a vital role in the community. And I did an example, Early Steps. DCFS uses Early Steps a lot. We do a lot of referrals with any child under the age of 3, and we also deal with substance exposed, meaning that a child was born with some type of illegal substance in the system. Wellsprings, which will fall under domestic violence, and we have the court-appointed children advocacy, which is CASA. Like child welfare services and CASA play a hand in hand. Their interest is for the best interest for the child, so we deal a lot with CASA. And as far as like the financing, it looks like each state gets a certain amount of money. The last financing that I can find that was more current, it looks like states get between $13.5 billion, and they are to distribute out to what services they feel are needed the most. And it looks like child welfare services actually, which surprised me, gets the less funding. And this just kind of explains that it's how it's divvied out through like state grants, Child Justice Act grants, community-based action, and of course with any state it depends on each state and how much they'll get and what services are needed. As far as how does this policy kind of go with the field of social work, this policy has social work written all over it. You're advocating for your clients. I just did a little snippet that many social workers that graduate actually have a higher rate of working in the field dealing with child abuse or neglect. And basically, being a social worker, you play many roles, and the main thing is advocating for the safety of children as well as families. So like I said, social work is very, very big in this policy. That's when I was reading it, that's all I could see. It was like, dang, this is like what social work does. This is social work. And this is just saying, stop the abuse. And for our local Louisiana, if you know anyone that suspects a child being abused or neglected, I included the hotline number. And you can call 365 days a year, and all calls can be confidential. And these are my references, and that will conclude my PowerPoint presentation.